So I don't teach bodybuilding as we would think of it in the West. I teach weightlifting. And so the goal of bodybuilding is, of course, to build as much muscle as possible and also to look as good on stage as possible. Whereas the goal with what I teach, free weight lifting, is to become as functionally strong as possible, generally with a goal that is tailored to the demands of your life. So especially if there's a sport or activity that you love to do, you can tailor your program towards that particular thing, because again, the goal here is not aesthetic, it's performance, okay? So when I create programs, that's the perspective that I'm coming from. And I'm not thinking about individual muscles that I'm working in a particular workout. I'm thinking about the movement or perhaps the lift that I'm using to access that movement, and working on refining that, okay? So it's just a shift in perspective. But that's how I create my own programs for myself. That's how I create the programs for my students, is by perfecting the movements and also the lifts that we're going to be practicing. With that said, I want to share with you guys 3 reasons to muscle isolate and to create your program with this concept in mind. And the first would be what I kicked off by saying is if you're a bodybuilder, if your goal is aesthetic and it is to put on as much muscle mass as possible, most likely muscle isolation is going to be your friend. And I don't know that the kettlebell would necessarily be the tool that I would recommend for that. I think there's probably better pieces of equipment, although a kettlebell can be used for muscle isolation. But if that's your goal, then you want to program your workout, generally speaking, by the muscles that you're training, okay? So there would be one reason to muscle isolate. Another reason to muscle isolate would be in a rehabilitative setting. So if you have an injury, or you're working with a client that has an injury, there's a very good chance that the path to recovery is going to require or include isolation of the traumatized area, maybe the reciprocating muscles, maybe the surrounding muscles, or maybe the root cause of the problem, which could be 7 links lower in the kinetic chain. And you might have to do some work somewhere else to correct the problem much higher up that was resulting. So a rehabilitative setting is another really good example of when you want to muscle isolate. And the third reason, which is the one I saved this one till last because this is the one that I personally use the most, is when somebody comes to me, especially, and they're a new practitioner and they want to learn how to do free weight lifting, they want to learn how to lift kettlebells and all the other different free weights that I utilize. This is the type of practice that you develop skill on top of skill on top of skill. And there's a lot of neurological competency that has to be built along the way. And some of these lifts and patterns become very, very technical. Not only do they become technical, but a lot of them become technical and have to be done at a very high rate of speed. So again, the nervous system has to generate and has to build these skills over a period of time. So somebody comes to me and they want to develop this level of functional fitness that's going to carry over in their life. It's going to help them in their weekend warrior. It's going to help them to not get injured. It's going to help them perform better. However, when I ask them to do a body-weighted hip hinge pattern, which, as we all know, is the basis of the deadlift and the kettlebell swing and the kettlebell snatch and the kettlebell clean, and it is such an important movement in what we're going to be doing together. And I asked them to do it with body weight, and I can see that they go cat back. In other words, their back rounds, and maybe their neck extends like this, and you've got all kinds of problems. Then we're not ready for that level of integration yet. Even with body weight, I haven't even put a kettlebell in their hand. We're not ready for that level of integration. So how am I going to approach this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these movements, I'm going to break them down into their core components. So what is a deadlift, or what is a bend pattern? It's a back extension with a neutral chin. It's the ability to hinge in the hips. So flexing in the hips, flexing in the knees, while maintaining the neutral spine, and also while maintaining tension in the core, coupled with a breathing pattern, the correct breathing pattern into the belly using your diaphragm, coupled with keeping your feet flat on the floor. Those are all of the component parts of a body weighted bend pattern. And we're going to break this exercise down into as many component parts, which means I might have the person practice breathing, balloon breathing, and all variations of very simple laying on your back breathing, into adding the balloon, all the way into coupling the breath with the exercise with a balloon. There's all types of ways that we can progress that. So I'm going to break the movement, the big movement, the bend pattern or the squat, how I normally would think. I'm going to break it down into its core components. And now we're focusing much more on an isolation of a given area. This is the type of thing that I do all the time. Once now we have competency with extension, what we might do some prone cobras on a Swiss ball and some leg raises to strengthen not just the muscle, but the neurological connection to the muscle that's already there. That's primarily what we're doing here. We don't need to even get to hypertrophy. What we need to do is we need to access these muscles consistently through the nervous system to route neural connection to them so that they fire when you ask them to. Because most muscles are there, they're just asleep, and we need to wake them back up again. So a lot of this isolation at this level, that's what we're doing. We're not trying to make the muscle bigger, we're trying to make the muscle work properly, right? So with the bend pattern, we're going to do some prone cobras, some leg raises. We're going to wake those muscles up. We're going to stop way short of failure so that we can sleep on it tonight and come back tomorrow and do it again. And then we're going to stop short of failure and just consistency with a median amount of volume, but consistently every single day working on it. And you'll be blown away at how quickly somebody who previously, a few days ago, could not hip flex, could not hinge in the hips without rounding their back to save their life, within just a few days, now they can do it repeatedly without problems. So it happens very quickly when you grease the groove like that. Low intensity, but high frequency. Okay, do it every single day, just a little bit every single day, and you'll be blown away at how quickly your body adapts. So you break it down. You've got the extension, you've got the hip flexion and the knee flexion, you've got the breathing pattern. You break the exercises down into their core components in isolation, and that is the time that I use isolation a lot with my clients. The mistake that I think that people make is they're not bodybuilders. They're no longer rehabilitating their body, and they've developed a level of competency to where they are, let's say, at least unconsciously competent at basic exercises that they're doing regularly. These isolation exercises. So you see a lot of people doing back extensions in the gym. It's a very common thing. And most people, when they're doing it, they've been doing it for years, and they're pretty much zoned out while they're doing it. They're having to really focus on firing the muscles because they've been doing it for years. But the mistake that they've made is that they learn to a certain level of technical difficulty, but then never went any further. And so their nervous system has had nothing more complex to adapt to. And I think that when it comes to your training, do not progress your training simply by adding a greater degree of intensity. In other words, holding a heavier weight. Don't progress your training simply by increasing the volume. In other words, more reps and more sets of the same thing. Progress your training by taking the exercises that you're performing and making them more and more complex. Turn your back extension now into a deadlift. Once you've got competency with a deadlift, turn that into a two-handed kettlebell swing. Turn that into a one-handed kettlebell swing, turn that into a kettlebell clean, turn that into a kettlebell snatch. You think that you're done there, you're just getting started. There's so much more. Think about bent press, you think about going to bottoms up exercises, even the Turkish get up, and I can create a 30-minute video on why you should Turkish get up. But the level of complexity that you can take your body to beyond the back extension machine is significant. And when you start to combine now the back extension with your hip flexion and the power phase and all of these things by moving into kettlebell swings and all of these other exercises, now you're doing all of those things in one go. What happens is you end up spending far less time in the gym because you're not just training one muscle group at a time, and you get a benefit from your training that all of that isolation exercise accumulated couldn't have given you. Okay, and I can go into a lot more detail on what that means. But all of that, the isolation cannot accumulate to the same benefit of learning how to do all of those things together. And one of those things would just be getting the nervous system to multitask in that way. When you're in jiu-jitsu or on a mountain bike, or when you step outside onto your back patio in the winter and your foot slides out from underneath you, or when you're a weekend warrior doing any number of things, it's your nervous system is having to fire and it's having to multitask. It's having to do multiple things at once. If you're teaching your kids how to play football or baseball or soccer and you're running around, you know, these things, your nervous system is doing countless things all at the same time, balancing, jumping, one leg, both legs, throwing, catching, whatever it is, coupled with your breathing pattern. When you go in the gym, if you want to strengthen your ability at doing any of these things, your time in the gym should at least be as complex as that, neurally speaking. Because otherwise you're teaching your nervous system in the gym simplicity, expecting it to respond when you throw at it complexity, and that's not going to match. Okay, so don't make the mistake a lot of people make, which is they're ready to integrate, but just a lot of people don't know how, or don't see the benefit, or it's also intimidating. And you usually have to find a coach, right? Like, let's be honest, like, you generally have to find somebody that can really guide you so that you progress through your training properly and make sure that you're on the right track. So progressing from just back extensions into deadlifts could be intimidating for a lot of people. Progressing from deadlifts into swings could be super intimidating to people, let alone getting into snatches and all of these other different exercises you can do. The other thing too, of course, that plays into this is the fact that when people are in a public setting, they don't want to look like a dummy doing it, messing up. I do it all the time because I do kettlebell lifts at the gym that I'm using a weight that I know is going to be very borderline. And if my technique is off by just a hair, that weight's going to come down. And a lot of times it comes down, but I know that it's going to come down. I bring it down in a controlled manner, and there we go. And a lot of times I'll put a weight down 3 or 4 times in a row on a failed lift, and then end up getting it 30 or 40 times thereafter because my nervous system switched on and I got the technique down, and I had the strength for days to perform it, but my nervous system wasn't just quite there yet. So again, that speaks to what I'm sharing with you guys. Improve and continue to make more complex the neural demand of what you're doing. And you will not be sorry if you do that. But don't forget, there's 3 times when you want to muscle isolate. If you're a bodybuilder, if you're rehabilitating, or if you're not quite ready to integrate. And that, my friends, happens all the time. I work with countless people where we're just not quite ready to integrate yet. Let's get the nervous system doing something simple, and then we'll progress from there. Hopefully, I didn't talk for too long. I've still got you watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.